I'm Vayoni Dimel. This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views and entertainment from Boston and USA. Sri Lankan Foreign Policy needs a strategic direction, says Shanaka Jayasekera, Sri Lankan Foreign Policy expert. Dr. Ananda Guruge shares his experience as a Sri Lankan ambassador to USA. Boston Sri Lankans remember the late Suminda Weerasinghe, cinematographer who died a few weeks ago. Sri Lankan foreign policy and where it's heading is a topic many are wondering given some of the public relations disasters and poor handling of Sri Lanka's foreign policy matters by the foreign policy makers of Sri Lanka. Even President Mahinda Rajapaksa, addressing a two-day resident workshop held last week in the Thalava for ambassadors, called on the diplomats to effectively counter the adverse publicity against Sri Lanka by inventing suitable campaigns, saying that many of them failed to highlight the economic growth in the northern province since the end of the war. Shanaka Jayasekera, an expert of Sri Lankan foreign policy matters, recently has written 2 articles to the island newspaper about the need for the Sri Lanka to have a strategic direction. Shanaka Jayasekera joins with Boston Lanka to discuss more on the Sri Lanka foreign policy. Shanaka, you obviously are not happy about the way the Sri Lankan foreign policy is being handled. You think Sri Lanka foreign policy needs a strategic direction. Could you please tell a little more about that?
Yes, as I wrote in my article which appeared in the Island of the 5th and 6th of July, in my view, I feel that there is no strategic objective that the Sri Lankan foreign policy makers are attempting to achieve. As you know, foreign policy is to enhance and advance the national interest of a country. Right now, there aren't any strategic objectives that Sri Lanka is attempting to meet. Rather, we are muddling through a very reactive kind of reactionary policy to events that are taking place. We don't have a coherent policy approach with set objectives to achieve.
In your article written in the Islander newspaper, you write, "We are walking straight into the LTT trap. The reality is that the president is popular at home, but internationally he is attracting negative publicity, and this strategy is counterproductive." Could you explain that? What strategy you are talking about?
Basically, the strategy that the Sri Lankan government has been using in the post-war period to as a nation-building process has been to take the president and undertake photo opportunity diplomacy, as I call it, to take the president around and meet with leaders and have a bilateral summit. Now, this strategy is not working. As I have pointed out in my article, the president has not been able to have any bilateral meetings with more than 3 OECD members in the last 3 years. Even if you take the G20, except for countries such as China, India, and Indonesia, and Russia, the president has not been able to have any bilateral meetings. However, what this strategy is doing is, given that the president is being the focal point of the strategy, he is drawing all the negative attention. And when you put that in the context of the Arab Spring, where a single individual draws negative attention, then using that same logic, an armed struggle is in some sense justified, as seen in the Arab Spring revolutions in Syria and Libya. So what we are pro-LTTE groups are doing is they are keeping the spotlight on the president. And the Sri Lankan government is pushing forward the president to be in the spotlight. And by him attracting negative publicity, the LTT is able to launder itself. The LTT agents are able to launder themselves to justify the violence, the terrorism that was undertaken. So the Sri Lankan government strategy of pushing the president or keeping the president in the spotlight is playing directly into the hands of the LTTE strategy. What I say in my article is that Sri Lanka has a very good story to tell. That is, the ground realities have changed tremendously. If you compare the situation during the conflict, the lifestyle of the people, the environment, the climate of conflict during the period of conflict to the environment of peace today, that's the story to disseminate. That's the story that we have to tell the world.
Also, you write, there has to be a realization that international diplomacy is not undertaken in the same manner as domestic political theatrics. Could you elaborate more on that?
You see that everything revolves around the president, and all the advisors around the president are trying to develop a policy approach that has the president front and center of the image building exercise. So if you look at domestic politics, the president being popular among the electorate, taking him around to electoral campaigns is advantageous. However, in the international domain, taking the president around is in some sense a disadvantage because he's drawing negative publicity. So the policy advisors to the president need to understand that the strategies used for political campaigns in Sri Lanka cannot be replicated in the diplomatic circles, and they need to change their approach to what I refer to as an approach of achievement showcasing. Showcase the achievements we have made, the fantastic achievements that have taken place. Compare the period of the conflict and compare the period of peace and development today. Showcase that, and that's what I call for. And again, I also go on to say that you can't only showcase bricks and mortar. You also have to promote devolution and a federal solution to the national question. The president is losing credibility internationally because internationally foreign governments believe that the president has the political capital in the South to push through a devolution package. And he's, in some sense, his sincerity is questioned when there is no forward movement on the issue of devolution.
Dr. Ananda Guruge served as a diplomat representing Sri Lanka for many years during his distinguished career. He served as the ambassador for UNESCO, France and USA. We spoke to Dr. Guruge about challenges and opportunities as a diplomat. You served as the Sri Lankan ambassador in USA. Recently we saw some tension between US and Sri Lankan governments. Any insight on strengthening US and Sri Lankan relations?
Yeah, the problem that USA very often has is that a certain part of the State Department considers human rights as something sacrosanct. And very often the interpretation that they like to give may not even apply to their own country, but they think that they have a role as guardians of human rights in the world. And when I was ambassador too, this kind of resolutions were coming up almost at every meeting of the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. Now, Human Rights Commission in Geneva is not a body with any kind of administrative control of the United Nations program. Sometimes we get a little too excited about what when they say something against a country, it makes big news. But unless the Security Council has made the resolution, now if this resolution came at the Security Council, then we are in trouble. But when the human rights, we try to save it because we try to save the situation by trying to explain to the people and giving them as much information as possible. Sri Lanka has a good hearing from them. At least on 3 occasions, as ambassador, I was able to get the State Department. And I must say very frankly, it was not so much because of my diplomatic abilities, but the man in charge of human rights and I served together UNESCO as ambassadors, and we knew each other in a very friendly way. So these were resolutions that was brought in Canada, and he was telling me, how can I explain that we cannot go with Canada? But somehow or other, at the end of it, he said, we don't have to go through Canada. So Canada could not get USA's support. In all these matters, personal relationships count more than logic or argumentation or persuasion. And in those 3 occasions, the fact that we were friends happened to be. There was of course one lady who was also in charge of human rights. She was blaming us, saying that you don't allow fertilizer to be taken to Jaffna because your third world scientists say that bombs can be made. You know, when Oklahoma went up with a bomb made from fertilizers, I telephoned and said, after some third world science has been, they had come on to this country too. I was nasty to her. They knew me that I could be also nasty sometimes. But the fact simply is that we have to keep on making friends within the administration. I must pay a very big tribute to the present ambassador Jalia. You know, Jalia had done much more than most people that I know had been able to do in bringing friendships to have an impact on policy. The more people that he had taken to Sri Lanka, whether they are congressmen or senators or business people, have more friends. Because there's nothing like people seeing it. This time too, the resolution that was passed, although the Sri Lankans had, the Sri Lankan average public, the things, it is something completely against. No, they are asking us to implement our own findings.
The Friends of late Suminda Weerasinghe, award-winning cinematographer, held a special Buddhist puja in Boston a few weeks ago. Our Saw News host Esther Wahida spoke to Chitral Dimel, president of Boston Lanka Media Network, about Suminda.
Suminda was in the USA this January when he was the lead cameraman in the first ever Sri Lankan teledrama done in the USA. He stayed more than 1 month in Boston. I spoke to Chitral Dimel, president of Boston Lanka, about Weerasinghe.
He's the cinema photographer of one of the very well-known films such as Abba, Arunata Pera, Bindu, and then Road to Elephant Pass. And then there are countless of films. I think he had been the cinema photographer for about 39 films. And then, of course, he had worked for more than 200 films in his filming career that last about 40 years. And he had won about 23 national awards for cinema photography.
And he came to Boston, why?
Well, he came as the lead photographer, lead cameraman for the teledrama we have done in Boston. It's produced by Boston Lanka. It's the first ever Sri Lankan teledrama in USA called Adarani and Niagara. And he was with us for about 1.5 months and been a real inspiration and also been a mentor to many of us who really helped us with this teledrama project.
What will you remember about him?
Well, of course, he has wealth of experience as a cinema photographer and as a filmmaker, but he's very humble, very gentle, always willing to share what he knew, always willing to motivate the young people, and he had so much love and passion for filmmaking, and he's a very committed person. Always wake up at early morning, no matter how late he goes to bed. Sometimes we shoot till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the night, midnight, and then we start from the following day around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. He's the first one to wake up and wake others up, and sometimes even make coffee for the... he's such a team player. And he won so many friends in Boston, and that's why some of us are getting together to do this special Buddhist event for him, because he's such a wonderful person.
That concludes our news edition. We meet you again with another news edition of News, Views and Entertainment from Boston and USA. Till then, goodbye.